Welcome to the EZCODE Projects Series Maze video number 7. If you have not done so already, please complete the previous EZCODE Projects Maze Series videos. For those of you that have done so, let's begin. In the last video, we added the logic to randomly add the inner walls to our maze. In this video, we'll complete the last portion of logic for the maze algorithm. Let's review the last portion of the spec from the website. I already have the site. You can pull it up here. And we're just going to scroll down. We've made it through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We did 5. We did 5. Step 5B, complete the maze. The final row differs from a regular row in just 2 ways. Every cell has a bottom wall, okay? And every cell must be a number of the same set. Okay, making each cell part of the same set is simple. Just remove the walls. Okay, so this is what we really need to do, is just remove the walls between the cells that are members of different sets until all the cells are part of the same set. Do not remove a wall if it separates 2 cells which are members of the same set. This is the piece we're going to hold on to. You know, we could look at all this and try and change every cell's numbers, but we don't have to do anything to the numbers in the cells themselves. We just have to look and see if, and not remove a wall if it separates 2 cells which are members of the same set. So let's see what their example says here. Start by creating a normal row. Here we go. Complete by knocking down walls that are members of different sets and unioning them until, so let's just look at this real quick. They have their starter wall, they have their rights right here, and you can see even they are still creating isolations. You can see right here, just like ours was in the last video on the bottom row, and they're scrubbing through it and they're saying these 2 are already the same. There was no right wall, nothing to do. Moves to the next one. 1 and 3 are not the same. Knock the wall down. It's going to make it a 1. Now we have, what do we have here? We have a wall here. It's 3 and 3. They 2 cells which are members of the same set. So the 3 and 3 are members of the same set, and it keeps the wall. Now note, it's changing it to 3. We don't have to worry about any of that logic. We just have to know, hey, are these members of the same set? If so, we're going to keep the wall. And then it just goes through until the end, and that's the last part of the maze. So you can see, starting it had 1, 2, 3 right walls, and in the end it only ended up with 1. So let's go ahead. We're going to return back to the, well, not return yet. We haven't opened it yet. So let's actually open the maze project. We're going to open up VS Code, open the Explorer tab, open folder. I keep mine in projects, EZCODE, maze. There we go. We're going to open it up. And the Code.js, great. It was already open for me. Fantastic. Remember, just type as I do. Pause the video or slow down the speed when needed. Understanding will come later. Let's begin. So we are talking about the last row only. So that's what we're talking about right now. And let's make so before we do any logic, we need to know where we're going to put it. So we do know we have our maze here, and we have our create row, and then we create our fields or our right walls. That's what this one was doing. And then we go down to set up our object we need for our bottom wall. So again, we're in the whole loop here. We have object entries. We need to go right below object entries, and we're going to continue our logic here. So now we can start. We're talking about the last row. And how do we talk about the last row of an array? Well, first we're going to have an if statement that says row index, and we're going to say if row index is equal to the last index of the array. Now, of course, we don't know what that could be. It could always be changing. We could add more rows as needed dynamically. So we need to know, again, I always put, when I have a few things to do in here like length, I just like to see them in another set of parentheses. And we can add as many inner parentheses as we need. Now the if statement requires at least one here. And we could just leave them off. Could just leave those off like that. But you can see already row index equals, well, it equals this whole thing, row length minus 1. So that's why I put them in parentheses like this. And you can see it's saying, hey, you need one more here. So now we can say row index is equal to this entire thing. So same thing you might do in math where you do inside the parentheses first. So this will have to resolve before it's compared to the row index. It's just preference. That one's not required, but I like doing that, and you may as well. So let's open up our if statement here with the curly braces. We're going to open them up. And now we just need to iterate over the row again with a for each. And if you remember, we've done this several times before. See if you can remember how to do it before I start typing. So we need the row, which we have, which we know is an array of the columns. And we're going to say for each, open the parentheses for the function, and we're passing in another one. And on this one, we're going to use the column. We're going to use the column index and the column array. And then we're going to do a arrow, enter, curly braces, enter. And don't forget the semicolon right down here. Now, we're inside of, we can get in here, inside of the row for each function. We know we're talking about the last row because we're inside of our if statement here. And now we have to do the same bit of logic that we were doing before. How do we get the current row's set number? So if you remember, we can just scroll up here and we can say, well, we did something like this. We need the current row and we need the next row, because now we have to do the same thing again. We have to evaluate if these are matching or not. So we can just quickly copy this here and scroll down here, and we're gonna dump them right there. So we know we have the current set, and at least this column, our naming convention matches this. This is the one that we want, column, column. And then our next column is, we don't have that piece yet. So where did this one come from? So let's go back up there and say that was outside of the if statement. So let's grab that too. And again, you can always pause it here and just type it out to practice typing it. I also want to show you doing it this way too, because when you're beginning, you might not want to be doing a lot of typing if you're slow to type, which is perfectly fine. Doesn't matter how fast you do it. What matters is that you make some working code in the end. And so what we did here is we said, okay, inside of this statement saying, we need to know if you're the last row. And if you are, great. What we're gonna need to do, I actually put this in the wrong spot here. Let's move this out and put it in the array. That's where we need to be. So now we have a next column, and we kind of have to do the same thing we did before. I got ahead of myself here, but let's just open up this for a second. Now the same thing we did up here. Let's go back up here. And where was it? We said, give me the next column, and then we need to know, are you the last column? So let's add this part here as well. This is what I get for copy pasting in here. So now we're here and we're saying, okay, great. Let's say if the next column is not equal to undefined. Now we're going to open our braces and we're just going to copy paste this part back in here. And we're going to clean up our empty lines. Okay, now we're sitting like we should be. We have to say, hey, look, let's go through the row. If you're the last, if there is no next column, ignore this. But if it's not undefined, then don't ignore it. So we have the current set coming from the column, which is right here. And we're saying get attribute data set, which is the one that we created. And then we're using next column, which is right here. So it's not undefined. That way we can call it. And we're going to say, what's the next set number on there? Now all we have to do, now that we have these things, is evaluate them. And we're going to do that with an if statement. And we're going to say, hey, if the current set is not equal to the next set, so they're not the same, Then we're going to say column. Don't forget we were using style, border, right, and what are we going to assign there if we want to make the border right meaningless again, just like we did the border bottom here. We're going to have a blank string. So if they are the same, we're going to do nothing. So if there's a right wall there, great. If there's no right wall there, it doesn't matter. We're not going to do anything. But if they're not the same, we're going to overwrite no matter what. So border right, it might not have a wall there, but if they're not the same, we're still going to assign it nothing. So we're just moving through the row just like they did in the algorithm example, and we're going to get rid of the wall no matter what on only the times where they don't match. So time to save our work and load the Vue HTML file in the browser. So let's go ahead. I have unsaved work here. I'm going to hit save. Great. Now I'm going to open up Google and we'll say open file. There we are already. The Vue HTML, that's our load file. We're going to click open. And let's see. Let's get the developer console open. I always like to have this open in case there's errors that we have to deal with. And I'm just going to squeeze that open a little bit more. Now we can see we don't have any of the isolations at the bottom. I don't see any isolations within the walls here, but let's hit refresh and see what happens. Again, the ball, there's nothing down here this time. It looks like we can make our way around the maze. And I think we've solved our isolation problem here. So it's looking really good now. But how do we get in or out of our maze? So let's return back to the code.js file and fix that. So here we go. And for the bottom row, we can just add a random selection of that row and set the border bottom to an empty string. So inside of the last row if statement we just made, so that would be here, we're just going to, outside of the for each here though, so we're in the if statement. You can see that with this line here. And what we're going to do is, just as we did before, in fact, we can even go up here and copy paste this. But you know what? We're going to type this one out. So it's a const, and it's going to be column, and it's going to equal randomize. And what are we going to randomize? We're going to randomize the row array of columns. And we're going to say, give me one of the columns. And with that column, let's set the style for the border bottom. And we're going to set it to nothing. So it's going to find one of them, and it's going to say, boom, you have no border bottom. Now, what do we have to do for the entrance? Now, we would do the same thing, but just for the top row. So we're not going to do it inside of row equals last row type of thing. So we'll just go right above this because it is the top row, and it just makes sense to be above the bottom row. And we're going to enter to open up some lines, and we're going to say, hey, if. Now, this might seem exactly like we did before. We're going to say row index is equal to what? What's the row index of the first row? 0. And we're just going to open up our if statement, curly braces. Now we know it's the first row, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say, let's assign a value of column, and let's do it through a randomized row. And you can see the power of that randomized function now. We're using it all over the place. Same thing, we're going to set the style, and that style is going to be border top. So column style border top, and we're going to do the same thing. And that's a blank string for that one as well. So let's save our work and refresh the browser. So we got some good spaces here. Just check real quick we didn't make any little mistakeys. And I'm going to go ahead and save. And we'll go to the browser and we'll hit refresh. And we are missing one thing that we have to look at. I don't see the top row here, but we do have the bottom row. So that's great. Let's just go back real quick and see what I missed here. If the right. If the row index is equal to 0, we're going to, did we get this one right? Randomize the row. We got the style. Oh, does anyone see what it is here? So we randomize, the row index is equal to 0, great. We're going to randomize it. We have the column. Here's where typos come into play. So we have a column style of border bop. Now, border bop isn't a property of the element, but you know, apparently it's a good time. So we're just going to get rid of that real quick, and we're going to say border top. So I'm going to save work, and we'll refresh the browser. Now note, it didn't have any problems rendering. We didn't see any errors. We just saw we didn't have our border top. So not all errors are going to be in the console, and sometimes they'll be a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot. But whenever you're going over this and you see something that's not correct, always start with the spelling of your code and then move from there. Now we're going to refresh, and we do have what looks like an entrance. So let's go ahead and follow this through here. Looks like we can make it to the exit. None of these are isolated. I can still get to all parts of the maze. And let's see. Now it looks like we have a real maze. So let's make sure we can get through it by doing a couple more refreshes. Here we go. We got an entrance. Boom. Looks like we can make it through. Here we can make it through. So it looks good. Now let's go back to the code.js file, and let's get rid of the inner HTML, as we don't need to see that in our maze anymore. So these values, thank you values for being here. We no longer need them, and all we have to do is remove them. So if anyone remembers, where did we reassign them? So we took them out of the create row earlier, and we moved them up here somewhere. And what we can always do is a Command F in Visual Studio, and I remember it was inner HTML. So there it was. It came up right here. Now, we just had it here for testing. You're more than welcome to a command forward slash will comment it out, or you can just add a comment, oops, like this to comment it out if that's something that you want to look at again. I'm going to remove it for myself and get rid of those empty rows. And let's play around with our logic a little bit more while we're here. Let's make our maze bigger. So change, you remember the rows and the columns constants that we created, the global ones. They're at the top, and we said, hey, columns and rows, you're 8. You know, what if we made this, let's change them to 20 and see what happens. So we'll go in here and say 20. And we'll go here where that one was, and we'll say 20. And then let's save our work and go back to the browser. And we'll just give it a little bit of room here and refresh. Boom, that looks like a maze. So in fact, let's close this developer console. We know everything's working here. So this is a really big maze now. So it's a little bit harder to go through. See, here's a dead end. Come through here. Looks like we can make it through. And there we go to a finish line. So let's see. We have a lot more room now. Let's mess around a little bit more and take a little bit more of the screen. So we'll go back to our code. Let's set the columns. We're going to set them at 40, and we'll set the rows to 30. So not a perfect sphere anymore, or I'm sorry, a square, but a rectangle. We're going to save our work, and let's go back to the browser. We're going to refresh. Wow, that's way bigger than this. A little bit too big for the screen I'm currently rocking here. So I'm actually going to go back real quick so we can look at this, and I'm going to say, we'll make it 25. For me, your screen might be good for what you're doing. So just make sure you can see it all. So I can see the entrance and the exit now. It's looking like a rectangle. And look how easy it is to change a couple global variables, and magically our maze grows. So it's really unique because we're actually looking at the algorithm itself. This is what the algorithm, looks like. You can see it's not always the same, but yet it is. It always has the same structure, but there's there's nuances to it. So you can see each one, I mean, eventually it will repeat itself if anyone can remember where all the lines are, but every now and again it would do that. But it looks fantastic. We can really get a good maze going in here all over the place. So just a bit of randomness inside of the boundaries we set in our logic has created what we have here, and it's beautiful. So great work, everyone. We've completed the logic portion of our maze. In the next video, we'll refactor a bit of our code to make it more concise and perhaps, if we're lucky, more readable as well. If you enjoyed this video, click like and then subscribe buttons to get notifications of new content. I thank you for exploring programming with me, and I'll see you in the next video.